André Holland, and Aldis Hodge. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a little breezy today, I think. So Dutchman is such an important play. It's one that has already been revived twice, had a few feature adaptations. What was important for you in terms of doing a modern retelling of it?
Yeah, thank you for that. It really was so it was a play first in '64, and then in '67, they really just put the play on film. Brilliantly acted by Al Freeman Jr. and Shirley Knight as Lula and Al Freeman Jr. as Clay. And I felt that, and it's a play that, as a storyteller, I've known for a very, very long time. And anyone who's actors gone to drama school or know about theater and things like that have had to do some type of monologue from this play at one point in time in their careers, or have read it. And so it was a very familiar work, a very academic work, a very literature heavy work. And I felt that the themes, which were so poetic and so philosophical at the time, were still relevant now. This was a play that's 60 years old, and it was still relevant now, but the context and structure in which that play needed to be retold needed to be modernized, in my opinion. So we wanted to pay a lot of homage to the original, but also bring it into our current era. And what that meant for me was moving outside of the train, because the train in the story is also a character, and so it's two characters on a train. That's the play. That's the only thing that happens in the play. But I wanted to see what Clay's life was outside of the train. I wanted to know more about Lula. I wanted to know more about their friends and their relationships, and all of that made for a wonderful opportunity to tell a story.
Yeah. André, I know that you've talked about having studied the play or read it in college. As you prepared for the role of Clay and you were revisiting the work, what struck you the most? Like, was there something that maybe you missed the first time around, or something that just resonated just as much for you today as it did when you first read it?
Yeah, a bunch of things. Thank y'all for being here. Also, I appreciate y'all coming out. Yeah, a lot of things. I mean, I think when I first read it as a young actor, I just wanted to get on stage and yell and scream and throw stuff. But then coming back to it as an adult, I could appreciate it as like a piece of political theater too. When the play came out in the 60s, it was like a bomb went off, and reading it now, I think I can see a lot more of the work that Baraka was trying to do, talking about, obviously identity, but also like capitalism and like class and sex and all the things, So yeah, it was exciting to come to it as an adult and think about those things.
Zazie, your character is new to the story in a sense. I mean, she's part of the expansion that André was just talking about, but Kaya plays a huge role in this, and we're not going to give anything away, but I was just wondering how you felt, how the character was described to you, since she's not in the original text, how she was described to you when you were offered the role, and what about that characterization really drew you to it?
I think I was interested in sort of just exploring this play and the work, and I feel like I liked the exploration of the complication of Clay and Kaya's marriage. I think André and I had talked a lot about actually like how to not make Kaya just sort of like this supportive woman, as Clay is kind of having this big experience, and Kaya not just sort of like yes-anding it in a way. And we had a few conversations about that, because that was really important to me before I signed on, actually. But then, I think we came to a place of like keeping Kaya flawed as well, and and how does she sort of also fit into this narrative of identity search and the identity of also being Black in America and not just wife.
Aldis, your character Warren is also a new addition to this story. We know that he's Clay's friend, but it's also clear he's driven by his own motivations, right? In this story, how much does his friendship impede in his ambitions, and the other way around, right? Like, in terms of what he himself wants to accomplish, like how is that going to affect his friendship with Clay?
I see, you're clever. You said, how much does it impede? We might be giving away secrets. What's happening? Well, I'll say it like this. The way I view the role is I believe it's a vehicle for setting the tone for another challenge for Clay on his road, but also presenting an issue that a lot of us deal with relationally when it comes to those close to us, or when we're dealing with our own realities that merge with others, trying to figure out where we prioritize certain things. I think the deal with Warren and Clay, they have this very important event, to supplement and support Warren that needs to go on. Everybody needs to show up and perform, but Clay is going through something very serious and major within the space of all this that's happening. So I believe we use Warren to challenge Clay to ask certain questions. I can't say what those questions are, but they're deeply internal and I feel like also deeply conflictual in ways that we all understand. So I love the addition of Warren and to I think the grander scheme of the additions, the new additions. I think the way I read it was, I think Gaines was intentionally cognitive about the current generation and being able to make this, first of all, translation from play to film is a skill set all its own, but to make it relevant in a way that seems obvious, because it still is relevant, but this generation today may sometimes say, well, in what ways, right? So the way that he brought in the rest of what's happening, the way he brought in all these other characters to really support that idea, I think helps the translation of what this film truly is about.
You mentioned these internal questions, and with the framing, it becomes the movie becomes increasingly metatextual, where you're watching the original story. Again, try not to give too much away. You're watching the original story through a new framing. And this is something I'd like to ask the group, as you worked on it, did you start to see more, like little bits of your own personality in your characters?
Go for it. To be honest, I saw more, I feel like I had more in common watching Clay, because I feel like I've been there before. First of all, Holland is amazing. I'm sure y'all already knew that was going to happen, but he's amazing, and so is Zazie. And look, I love actually watching their relationship on camera, because there's a lot that we all go through that I'm like, damn, I just had that conversation. That's the answer I should have gave. But watching Clay unfold and go through this, I was like, oh, there's a process, a time in my life where I was trying to really define who I was, really find myself, step away from people pleasing, step away from putting other people's priorities and agendas before mine, because you get trapped in a space where you don't even understand who you are with yourself. What is your relationship with yourself? And I felt like, as an audience member, I'm watching Clay be presented with these questions, some of the questions he's asked himself, but he's working through the process. So for me, just as a man, as an individual, and as a black man, I'm like, oh wow, this is very clear. And I quite enjoyed the journey, just because it felt like a well-rounded sort of holistic experience that it touches everybody, because we all go through this, but in particular with what Clay was going through, for me, I felt that connection, because it's almost like you feel seen a little bit.
I was gonna say too, I think just that question made me think about your first question about what it is about the play now, that feels different. In the original play, Clay is written as a 20-year-old kid, right? Young man. And I know I look 20, but he's not. But, you know, in the play, Clay really is attracted to this alluring, sexy, you know, woman that's played by Kate Mara. And he immediately falls into her sort of orbit, her trap, I guess you could say. But in this adaptation of it, you know, Clay, this is a different Clay. And I think one thing the movie does really well is that it frames Clay and Warren as like solidly middle class, potentially even upper middle class black folks who have bought into the idea that I think that like capitalism and like being a good capitalist is like a pathway towards liberation, right? And so until he finds himself alone on that train with that woman who challenges everything he thinks he knows about himself and, you know, forces him to say, well, okay, what if I step outside of that and really express the wholeness of who I am? Right? Allow my ugliness to come out and my sassiness, my messiness, and let it all out. My desire. Is it possible for me still to exist as a whole person in that kind of a way? And in the play, what we find out is the answer is no. Because, you know, in the play, Clay is murdered. We have a different ending here, which we ain't gonna give away. But I think that, like that kind of a thing is like an interesting thing to think about in terms of like why it's relevant today. Because I think that's a question that we're all asking ourselves now. We've bought into this idea of like, you know, what this country is all about. And yet we all know that like in order for us, for like some to be successful, some other people have to suffer, right? But like the question I like to think about is like, is that the only way? Is that inevitable? Or has like this like racist capitalist thing only like replicated and now concealed itself? And like, anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But it's an interesting play, and I think it's a good movie. I think y'all ought to check it out. I'm gonna shut up now. Who wants to talk?
No, thank you for that.
That was good.
Oh, wait, no, I'm on deck. Wait, here, you take that. I'll take this one.
Me?
Yeah, for me, it really was about being able to surround Clay with his tribe. I know just in my own life, my tribe of friends, my tribe of close friends, these are guys and women, you know, that are very close to me, know in my inner circle, really sort of understand my ups and downs and things that I sort of go through. And one of the first things that André Holland and I talked about when I asked him to play Clay was that, yes, in the original, he's like a 20-year-old kid and very passive, you know, very passive in the original play. And we sat and talked for hours and hours just about making him more active, you know, making him more of a driving character as opposed to just being completely run through everything by Lula. And that was, you know, that was a challenge, just because Lula is so domineering and so dominant and just overbearing in everything that she does. And part of that was being able to take Clay out of that train and actually give him and give the audience the opportunity to sort of see his world. And you know, I make so many movies about the black experience, but especially about black men. I did this with a film called The One and Only Dick Gregory. I did it, you know, telling a story about Jesse Owens. A lot of historic stories that come from this era or before, and The Dutchman really was no different, and it was really trying to encapsulate what it feels like sometimes to be a black man in a society in which you're trying to assimilate, trying to acclimate to, trying to be a part of, and whether or not any of the things that Warren's character talks about and Clay talk about is actually worth it or actually making a difference at the end of the day. But yeah, that was the idea.
I'm going to paraphrase a character a bit here. At one point, this character talks about rage and about how once upon a time, well, not once upon a time, but there was a point where rage could only lead to doom, only lead to destruction, but that it can be harnessed like a furnace, right? It can be used to power something. And you know, I think when, in a lot of our anger is usually something transient, right? It's meant to be something you work through. It's not the end goal. And you know, I found that quote really interesting in this context because, you know, it's almost like reminding us to find a way to harness that anger, because there are things to be angry about in this world. And, you know, like that for me was one of the takeaways in that moment, is that, you know, that, you know, don't stay angry in the sense that, you know, you never do anything productive, but also there's a way to harness that, to channel that into something more positive.
Yeah, I mean, it's really cool that you caught that, just because it took us, myself and my co-writer, it kind of took us a minute to find that line. It was actually something that we shot in pickups. And it's a variation on a James Baldwin quote, really, about the only through the furnace of rage can we truly survive, or can we truly be ourselves. Because so much of what Clay is going through, and even Warren to a certain degree, and honestly even Kaya to a certain degree, is just a suppression of self, suppression of emotions, suppression of all of these things, to just get in line and stay in that line. And so long as you don't deviate from that line, nobody is ever, or that lane, nobody is ever going to challenge you. But they're finding that so long as they stay in that lane, they can't challenge themselves, and that's even more important. And so when Clay, which is at the end of the film, has this, you know, huge monologue that he just sort of rages out. Dr. Amiri is, as the author, is giving him permission, you know, to do that, and it was incredible. And André Holland is just fantastic in the film doing it. I want to just mention that he did this in one take, this entire monologue, and and it was a marvel to see on set. It was such a wonderful day and wonderful performance. We all clapped, and it was so exciting to see that energy, you know, come through the screen. So really great job, man. Really fantastic. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. It really is such a great reimagining of that story. Like it feels, you know, there's a lot of adaptation going around these days. Like, how many more Frankenstein movies can we make, right? But this very much feels like an original story that honors the original. If that makes sense.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thank you guys. Thanks for coming out. Thank you guys.
See the Dutchman.
Dutchman's not the kind of man keeps us from jamming in the dam.